thank you everybody for coming here today to see me perform. My ISM was, how can I create a written work worthy of publication? As said before, my name is Matteo, also known as Matteo Suarez. I'm grade 12, class A. So let's get started. The introduction. Why did I choose the topic of writing? Well, first and foremost, I'm a passionate writer, love doing it. I also think that going more into writing as part of my ISM gives me an opportunity to improve the skills that I'm so passionate about. And it also could possibly lead to a career down the line. Not keeping my hopes up, but I'm keeping the option open. So, more about my driving question, what it means and why I chose it. So, what I mean by this question, how can I create a written work worthy of publication, is what do I have to do, what processes do I have to undergo in order to craft something of a high enough standard that someone else can look at it and think, okay, this is pretty good, let's put this out there, stake our reputation in it, and deliver this to our audience. And why I chose this question, well, the obvious one is that it allows me to learn about writing and publication. As I said, two things I'm passionate about and things that I want to pursue more in the future. But most importantly to me, it gives me time to find a synthesis of things that I love and schoolwork and combine them to pursue them both. Next one, what makes something publication worthy? Well, this is an incredibly subjective question with no definitive answer. It all comes down to the publisher and the editor at the end of the day. Before we go on, just a quick explanation of some publication terms and roles. In publication, there's the writer who writes and the publisher who publishes. And within the publisher sector, there is the editor who reads, edits, and approves what the writer writes. So I'll be using those terms from now on. But despite it being subjective, there are some things that you can do to improve your chances of getting published, like writing well in the most technical sense. That means proper spelling, grammar, punctuation, and structure. Nobody wants to read a story that doesn't make sense, and by following these, you can ensure that yours, despite the content perhaps, does. Another thing you can do is know what the publisher wants, know what they publish, the content that they publish, know who their audience is, and know the specific guidelines. Publishers often make clear some things like word count and maybe a theme or what style of writing they want. So knowing that beforehand and catering to that aspect rather than getting shot down because you're 20 words over the word limit is probably a good idea. Next, why is writing important? Well, writing has a very long and storied history. See what I did there? It comes ancient days of humanity and evolves through Sumerian cuneiform and the Phoenician alphabet into its modern form. Well, this is actually Beowulf, which is really old. But it has many uses in science, maths, fiction, legislation, commerce, even, as you can see there, even code is all writing. The recording of history, the spread of different theological and political ideas all came about through writing. There is probably no invention that has had a greater significance. To illustrate it, just do a little thought experiment and think about any form of study, any field of study, and what it would look like without writing. How could you show a mathematical proof by just talking about it? So on top of that, writing builds very important skills like communication, organization, perseverance, because it's difficult, and annoying, and critical thinking because it requires a lot of introspection and deliberation about what you are writing. And the key thing here is communication. Writing was invented to communicate, and that's what all forms of writing do. It also gives an opportunity for self-expression, which is something that people need in order to develop as a person and also exercise their emotions, thoughts, and beliefs day to day. So luckily for me, I already had 2 pieces of writing. The purple one is a short story, cyberpunk science fiction piece that I wrote for urban dreaming class last year in Mr. Newsom's class. And the yellow one over here is a article on mindfulness, specifically listening, that I wrote for Miss Mock's class this year, this first term. So using these, I'm going to go into my second goal, create a piece of writing, my first goal for ISM, not second. Create a piece of writing, flesh it out, complete it, and polish it. So I already have 2 pieces of writing created. I didn't need the first part. But the fleshing out, completing, and polishing is essential for all writing. You can see that it sort of goes in a cycle. You flesh it out, you add on to it, then you complete that, and then you polish it, and then you notice you have another mistake, and you go back, and you see something you don't like, and you add something new. And it sort of aligns with everything that I've been taught about writing and it being a cycle. Every teacher that I've had who's taught me how to write has always said that it never ends. The final draft is just the draft you send out when you don't have any more time. So for the next one, my second goal is to find at least 3 different ways of publishing my story or article. This is pretty straightforward. I just had to do some research, catalog, and find some things out. Goal number 3 was to petition using a way for my story to be published using a way that I've found. So this is me taking the 2 previous goals and combining them into something a bit more visual that people can see. So for my interviews, I interviewed Mr. O'Hagan, Miss Mock, Mr. Newsom, Lewis Rutherford, and Neil Gaiman. So for my interview with Mr. O'Hagan, I learned a lot about the differences between writing longer fiction and shorter fiction. I interviewed him specifically on the short science fiction piece that I wrote. He taught me a lot about what I need to keep in mind when writing a short story. For Miss Mock, I learned that sometimes, especially in my earlier writing, what I was saying was a bit obtuse to outside observers, so I need to lower the barrier of entry to understand what I was saying in my writing. And Mr. Newsom, I learned and I got a lot of great advice on thinking about the themes and philosophy that I wanted to explore in my story and what I wanted to say about the world with it. So I interviewed Lewis Rutherford, who is a crime novelist and has a degree in journalism. He taught me more about publication and that I have to be ready to fight for my story and be tenacious and not give up. Always take those no's and those rejections and just keep on going. And Neil Gaiman is a successful author and he has decades of experience, didn't get back to me. So all I got were tears and broken dreams. So, goal outcomes and documentation. I've combined these because they're pretty similar in my case. So, goal outcomes. The purple part is the science fiction story, and the yellow part, as previously, is the article on mindfulness. This is to illustrate my process of writing. The first part, if you follow it left to right, it shows the notes I made, and then I read through the document, made edits, and changed it all around, put little comments on it. And I did the same for my article. So this is the first line of my cyberpunk short story. The day starts at 6:37 a.m. with a gunshot at a waterfront cafe. This was the first thing that I thought of on a walk home when trying to come up with a story idea. So I sort of based my entire story around this line. So this is the first paragraph, the first draft, which was actually the final draft I submitted for class, but as I found out later, it was no good. So the first paragraph, I did one read through of the whole story, made some comments and edits, and you can see I commented about some ideas for the story and how the world works. I did another read through, and then I started writing. So this is the first draft that I made for this ISM project. I made little comments about little pieces that I thought could be changed, altered to make it better, some grammar or spelling things, and some world building ideas that I had. And this is the current state it's in, where it's a bit beefier. I have a lot more comments to go through, a lot of edits that I've made. And then this is also the evolution of my article. It's less visual because the short story is a lot longer. This is only a page and a half long, 700 words. So that is the final version of the article on the right, and on the left is my notes and my draft for it. So goal number 2, outcomes, was just gathering notes on publication methods and narrowing down my options. This was pretty simple. I just had to do a little research, make a few lists. This is a couple of the publications, science fiction magazines in particular, that I found that could possibly publish my story. So I just wrote their name, the genre, the submission guidelines, when they're open for submissions, what they want, what they don't want, how long they usually take to respond, when their magazine comes out, the approximate distribution size of their magazine, and if they pay me, which is not something that I was looking for, but it wouldn't hurt. And so for goal number 3, trying to get the story actually published, sort of came around as a fluke, where my mom had dinner with our neighbor who works for the Youth Hong Kong magazine, and she mentioned my ISM project, and my neighbor said, well, you could always submit anything. If you have anything on mindfulness, you could always submit anything to the magazine. And luckily I did. So I finished that article up after working on the science fiction story for the majority of the ISM. I finished the article up in 2 days because I had it due on Monday. And I sent an email over submitting my article and sort of introducing myself. And I got an email back. It was passed along to the editor. And then they got back to me saying that my article will be published in the issue of their June magazine. So, thank you. I just had to send them a few things, stuff about myself, anything related to my magazine, and then it was all sent through. And now my final product, the published article, comes out this June in Youth Hong Kong magazine. I don't know when, though, specifically. So this month. I already have my applause, so I can't get it again. So, for the summary, what have I learned? I learned a lot. I learned new things about publication because it's something I've never tried, and so that's always interesting to learn about what really goes on behind the scenes. But I also expanded my knowledge on writing and the cycle of writing, and really got to be faced with the fact that you are never finished writing. And it's just an endless process that you can get lost in, and eventually you have to tell yourself to stop. What would I change? Not much. I'm very proud of what I've done and what I've achieved. I could possibly reach out to more people for interviews or more people to get published, but that is neither here nor there because I like what I've done. What do I want to do in the future? I want to keep on going. I don't want to stop. I want to get better at writing. I want to try to publish more. I want to finish that cyberpunk story that I never ended up finishing. And I just want to keep the ball rolling. So for acknowledgments, I'd like to thank Mr. O'Hagan, Miss Mock, Mr. Newsom, Louis Rutherford, Sofia Suarez, my aunt, who helped me, Francesco Suarez, my father, Anne Damrell, my mother, Alessandro Suarez, my brother, though he didn't help me actually that much, Lakshmi Jakarta, my neighbor, Mia Yao, the editor of Youth Hong Kong magazine, Mr. Gilbert for wonderful feedback that he gave me on like 2 Mondays ago, and my fellow grade 12s for just like passively helping, I guess. Thank you very much. Any questions? Do I choose who's? Do I choose or do you? Yeah.
So between when you send in the final draft to publication editors and then when they got back to you and stuff, did they make any changes to your like how did the editing process actually work? Did they make any changes to your manuscript?
I don't know. I think they might have. But they said they would send me a layout example, and they haven't sent me anything yet. So I don't know if it's fully ready, but I'm fairly sure they did.
Oh.
Yeah, disappointing. Probably for the best, though. Darius?
Well, I think with like pictures or something.
Pictures of what? I didn't do any pictures for the story, like illustrations, but I did have photos. This is a picture from the story in its final draft. Yeah. So, the editor? Well, I submitted a photo of myself, if that counts. Yes, Miss Mock.
Matteo, this was a great presentation.
Thank you very much.
My question is, what are the main differences in the writing process when you write fiction and then when you write an article?
I think there's not much. You're both times you're trying to make things sound as interesting as possible. So maybe you would embellish a little bit in the nonfiction article part, but it's more about content. But the way you write, I noticed, did not change much. And I was still making the same edits, going through the same process. Perhaps there are different ways, and I would really like to explore them if such, but I found that it was quite close, quite similar. Mr. King, did you have a question?
Just words of wisdom for the grasshoppers, those
Mhm.
that will be on the stage next year as grade 12s, or the grade 10s or 9s. Anything you could tell us?
You know, the usual advice about starting early and not leaving it to the last minute. But other than that, I'd say definitely focus on something that you're passionate about, something that you want to do, and think hard about it. I started thinking about what my ISM would be around this time when the grade 12 symposium happened last year. And I didn't actually finalize it until like midway through term 1. So start thinking now, start putting plans in place. Restraining forces are more powerful than motivating forces. That means like an incentive to do something like getting a good grade is less effective at helping you complete a task than an incentive like, oh, if I don't complete this, I'm going to get a bad grade and it's going to lessen my chance. It's going to take something away from me rather than give me something. So try and put systems in place that will help you complete your task. Does anyone have any more questions? Yes, Autumn.
If you have the chance, do you think you're going to find a way to publish your cyberpunk story?
Definitely. I'd love to. That would be super cool, super jazzy, and I think it's neat, so I'd like more people to read it. Yeah.
I want to read it.
Yeah. Thanks. See, I already got one guy. Yes, Yuto. I'm sorry? Anyone that interests me. I'm predominantly interested in fiction because that's what I spend most of my time thinking about. But nonfiction was a really good exercise, and Miss Mock's class, Life Writing, which I wrote my article for, was one of the hardest classes, perhaps the hardest class that I've ever taken, and it was super rewarding when you actually wrote something good. So I think I'd like to pursue it more, though it's not my first inclination, so I'll need to motivate myself a little bit more. Am I done? I can't see some people, it's all dark. Yes, Darius.
So,
Do you usually ask some questions, suggestions, and come up with some amazing idea from certain aspects of areas? Say, you want to create your writing?
So do I ask questions to other people?
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. I consulted my parents and my teachers heavily, and my brother somewhat, though he mostly wasn't listening, I don't think. But yeah, it's always good. It's the best thing you can do to get other people's feedback. That your mind is isolated in a world, and your sensory inputs are not what everybody else is getting. So knowing what other people think is the best strategy. All right, I think I'll wrap it up there. Thank you very much.